Hello and welcome. Today's exciting episode is me making a tweed Chanel style jacket. And then I add some very fabulous beading on the back. I also give you an update on the Kandinsky jacket, which I think is finally done. Maybe.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
So I've had quite a few people asking me if I can put in a little bit more detail about several of the steps, so that's why this video is a little longer than usual for a jacket making video. So this is the tweed I'm using. It's black, cream, green and sort of teal, and I'm using an old discontinued pattern, but it has flaws in it. It has mistakes. So I would recommend Vogue 7975, which is a really good pattern, no mistakes. Or if you want something easier, Burda 6123. I'm using McCall's 6041, but as I said, it does have a few mistakes. So if you know how to redraft a pattern, then that's fine. You can probably find a copy on eBay, but I would recommend Vogue 7975. I'm just using this because I've already got like literally 100 of the Vogue 7975, and this one's slightly different. So firstly, when you're using tweed, I love tweed, but it's saggy and baggy and it does not age well. So you have to add a structural layer, a supporting fabric, and then you stitch the two together. I use stiff netting or netting. You can buy it from the costume or novelty section of any big fabric store. It's relatively cheap. It's only a few dollars a yard or a meter, but it just helps everything stand up. It's like if you've ever seen ivy grow, then it sort of slumps on the ground, but if it can grow up on a fence, it stands nice and straight. It's the same with a jacket. It will age so much better if you just stitch your beautiful tweed to a support, like a structural layer. So what I've done is, because I'm beading it, I need 2 structural layers, make it extra strong to counter the weight of all the beads I'm about to put on it. So I've cut out all the pattern pieces. I've cut out 2 of each of them. And this is the back. So we've got center back, left side back, right side back. So I'm going to pin them together and they will be my back shell, and then I'll drape my tweed over it. So I've pinned my 3 back pieces together, and now I machine sew these seams together, and that's going to be the back piece. And these are my 2 front pieces. So we have front center, the 2 front centers, and then the 2 front sides. So I'm going to put each of those 2 pieces together. So now I have the front left and the front right. And again, I'm just going to machine sew my structural layer together. So I have a whole structural layer shell, and then I'm going to drape my tweed over it, pin them together, stitch them together. And this is just one way to make it. A simpler way is to just cut out all the pieces of your jacket, cut out all the pieces again in your structural layer, and just make the jacket the normal way. But this is better for pattern matching. It's slightly more complicated, but I consider that it gives a smoother, more beautiful finish. So I machine sewed my 2 front pieces together, and then you pin, or you just turn your seam to the side, and then you machine sew it over again. So you can see I've actually done the second row of stitching on the other side. So now my 2 front pieces are done, and then I did the same for the back piece. I machine sewed them together, then I turned the stitches over. If you're just doing one layer, when I'm just doing one layer and I'm not doing beading over the whole thing, then I tend to splay the seam allowance and hand stitch it down, but this is just quicker. So now it is time to get out the tweed. And tweeds, there's 2 types of tweeds. One, you can tell the back from the front, and the other type is like this. Like this is the back of the tweed, and I just showed you the front, and you can't really tell the difference between the 2. It's just the way it's woven. If you've seen, knitting, it's sort of the same. Sometimes the inside looks the same as the outside. Sometimes they look completely, like they draw the string and they look completely different. So I've got another tweed that actually looks different from the front to the back. So this is the front here. You can see a lot of the silver, like the metallic on that one, whereas the back, you can't really see much of the metallic at all. It's more of just the olive and the cream. So technically, the side with the silver, this one here is the front and the other one is the back, but it doesn't matter. If you like the cream and the olive, I think that's quite pretty. If you like that side better, then that's your front. The point is every single piece that you cut out has to have the same side front. So either just put a sticker on it or put stitch into the front and do it, tie something to the front so you know which one's the front, or cut out all your pieces at the same time. You just have to make sure that you always cut all your pieces with one side as the front and not just randomly do other things. If you can't figure out, and also tweeds are directional, they're always directional. So if you can't figure out which way you should cut out your pieces, when you do your mock-up out of cotton, if you want to see me doing the whole mock-up process, there's a separate video and I'll put a card to it. When you do your cotton mock-up, to just make sure the arms fit, the sleeves fit, the shoulders fit, the back fits, the bust fits, do it out of a directional quilting cotton when you're making your mock-up, and that way anytime you're confused about which way your piece should go when you're cutting out on the actual tweed, you just look at your mock-up and you'll be like, oh, okay, it's got to go this way. So what I do next is I had my shell for my back part and I have my two shells for my front left and front right. So you pin it's very directional and it's got very clear lines. So I picked one particular bit of ribbon and I pinned the center back panel to the bottom. The center back panel, see, it's got, the back has 3 panels. The center one is straight at the bottom. So I pinned that along the ribbon line. And then I pinned all the way up just in the center panel. It's the 2 side panels that make the jacket round, like fit around your shoulders and around your shoulder blades. So you pin the center one first and then you pin the 2 side ones, and you just sort of, because the tweed is loosely woven, it's sort of, you can just smooth it and sculpt it into the shape that it's required. It's a really, really expensive European tweed. I tend to hand stitch the 2 layers together before I cut, but with this one, it's just a standard, well, all tweeds are a little bit expensive, but it's not one of the really loosely woven delicate ones. So I cut it out and then I'm going to hand stitch it together. Same with the front. It's the front center panels that are the straight flat ones, and it's the side center that give it the dimension. So you have to get the center front ones flush with the ribbon, that same ribbon in the pattern, find that and do the front center ones, pin them in place, and then sort of mold the rest of the tweed around the side front one, and that will give you that bust shape. I've done this lots of times. So if you need to use more pins, more rows of pins, then absolutely use them. If you don't think you got it right the first time, just try it again. When I'm starting to, after I've pinned the center front panel, the first pins that I do on the side front panels and the side back panels are the ones around the natural waist, because they're the straightest ones, and then I sort of work down and then I work up from there. And then I cut this out, and once all the torso pieces were cut, then it's time to cut the sleeves. It's most important to do the outer sleeves, the big piece of the sleeve first, and then do the undersleeve, the small piece of the sleeve. I'm not sure if you can tell here, but my undersleeves actually go, the lines on them are vertical rather than horizontal. So That's just because I'm stubborn and I only bought 1 yard of this fabric years and years ago, so I couldn't go back and buy more fabric. And yeah, originally I bought it to make the Vogue 7975 is a slightly smaller jacket, and this one is slightly looser. But yeah, if I keep my arms beside my body, which is how you normally wear a jacket, then you won't be able to tell. And this is me pointing out that in my jackets, I leave a little slit at the back of each sleeve, and that way it makes it easier to get them on and off. And also it makes it easier if you're writing or taking notes or something like that. So, and you also have to cut the front two pieces of the lining. Most of the lining is silk, but the front two center pieces are made of tweed or whatever you're making the jacket out of. So these are my two bits for and as you can see, they're vertical rather than horizontal as well, but I've just pinned them in. You won't see it once the actual jacket's made, but you do need them out of the same fabric, whether they're in the same direction or not. So now it is time to machine sew my sleeves, and it is time to machine sew the inside front lining pieces to the actual front of the jacket. So I've machine sewed them, and now I have to splay open the seam allowance, pin it into place, and then hand stitch it down. So as you can see here, I've already started pinning this one. You just open it up, hand and pin it in place, then hand stitch it down, and I also have to hand stitch the two layers together. So now I also have to do the same thing to the sleeves. So now I will go and do copious amounts of hand stitching, and eventually, after many hours, I will be back. Okay, so here we are. So you just hand stitch along the lines and use a thread that matches the outside. So this tweed is sort of cream, black, green, and it's sort of a beigey cream, so I used a beige thread, and you can't see any of the stitches. And I also hand stitched the seam allowance down. So just turn it round, and if you can see any of your hand stitches, just put a pin in the place, then turn it back over, cut either side of the stitch, tie them off, and then just do another stitch, and that's how everything is always invisible. So here we go, and I folded the front lining pieces inside, and so you can see that the front of the jacket is perfect. The pattern matching is perfect across the whole thing. So now we will do the sleeves. Same thing. I had to pin all the seam allowance back and then hand stitch each of the seam allowances down. It does take forever, but then you have the jacket for the rest of your life, so I think it's worth it. So here I am, nearly finished the second sleeve, almost, and you just take out one pin, do 5 or 6 stitches, then take out the next pin, do 5 or 6 stitches, and work your whole way along. So here we go, finally done. And as I said, that's the slit at the back of the cuff, and it just helps you get the sleeve on and off. So then you put your arm inside the sleeve, grab the bottom, and then carefully pull the whole sleeve in the correct way. That is how you turn it out without damaging the tweed. So the next thing is, it's easier to hem the torso of the jacket and hem the cuffs before you put the sleeves on. So I just go around, put a row of pins where the cuff is going to end, and then I turn them all up, and next then I just hand stitch this into place, and again you just take one pin out each as you go along, and there you go, it's all hand stitched into place. It doesn't look the cleanest, I guess, but the silk is going to cover it, so it just has to hold in place. And then I decided that I wanted to, there's a sort of greeny teal ribbony bits and threads in here, so I decided I'm going to add some beads to it. So this is what I mean, you can add the beads to a bit of fabric and then add them on, or you can do what I'm doing and embellish straight onto the jacket. So I just putting a handful of beads in no particular order. So I just put a row of pins. Again, I just measure out the bottom of the invisible band and the top of the invisible band, and I'm just going to bead in between that area. And then from far away, when the jacket's finished, it's going to look like it's got this sparkly trim on it where it's actually just me stitching beads on. So you can just put trim on and just fold under each of the ends and then hand stitch it on, whatever you prefer. Here we go. I have finished the second cuff. So now they're both done. They're roughly, as I said, the beading is just random, but they do have the exact same amount of weight on them. So now time to set the sleeves aside. So now it is time to do the back half of the torso of the jacket. And here we go. So it's still pinned together. Now, if you're not doing any beading, what you do is you hand stitch the 2 layers together, but I am going to stitch the 2 layers together by doing beading at the top, the middle and the bottom. So I'm going to have a triangle in the middle, and then there's going to be beading around the neckline and the base. So my triangle was too long, so I just shortened it a bit. And I think it's going to go here. Yeah, I was going to do it a little bit lower, but the weight would have felt weird. So I've just done it up a little bit. So it's on this, the weight is going to fall from the shoulder blades, if you get what I mean. So now I've decided this is where I'm going to put it. I've lined it up with the lines on the jacket, and then I just carefully stitched around it. So this is my outline. And this way, as soon as I've done all the beading, I can just cut the string, the thread, and pull it out, and it will just be magically beading without any outline. So that is how I'm doing it. And these are the beads. I've got loads of red beads. I don't know why. I just buy beads when they're on sale, and I don't have a lot of red tweeds, so I end up with, in my bead collection, I use up most of the green ones, most of the blue ones, most of the gold, and all the other colors. But I have just so many purples and so many reds, because those are the colors I don't particularly use, or I don't particularly have tweeds to match. Anyway, so I've finally decided that I'm going to use up some of them to do this arrow on the back of this jacket. So obviously I'm turning it around. It's just easier to stitch from the head of the this piece of fabric, because it's easier to get to. And the 2 questions about beading I get most are, how do you divide the beads up and add them in a particular order, and can you show thread by thread how you add them? So this is me. There's each time I got a new bit of thread, threaded it, and then started adding more beads. This is it took a little bit of footage, so that's what I'm doing. And I added the large beads first, then the medium ones, and then in the little gaps in between I added these red seed beads. So you go large beads, medium beads, and small beads, but you do it by weight, not necessarily by the look, because you want to distribute the weight evenly. So if you think some of the beads aren't the largest ones, it's because they're solid glass, and you have to add those ones first. And that's how you get an evenly distributed weight. And then I sort of just go around in a spiral and work my way in. If you're doing a piece that's just a strip of beading, then go from one side to the other, laying down all the heaviest beads first, and you stitch each bead on 2 or 3 times, depending on how heavy the bead is. And I use double thread in poly, not cotton. Cotton is natural, and all the fabrics I prefer to use natural fibre. But when you're using thread, poly is stronger, and also I've got a vintage sewing machine, so poly thread is cleaner, whereas cotton thread is weaker. It degrades quicker because it's natural, and also it's fluffy. Even the highest quality thread is fluffy, so you have to clean your machine more. So yeah, for that reason I use poly thread, but when I'm working with fabrics I try and use all natural fabrics all the time. So as you can see, it was quite late when I finally finished the beading, but I'll take another shot of it. Oh, and I will show you the beading on the Kandinsky jacket. I finally finished that one too. But yes, I'm really happy with this beading. I finally found a use for all my spare red beads. So that now all my bits are finished, I'll put these sleeves aside, and we have to actually make the torso of the jacket before we can set the sleeves, but I do like those beads. So first you put down the back of the jacket, and then you put one side on and you pin it at the sides and pin it at the shoulders. And it's just easier doing it one at a time. And then once the first one's done, you pin the second one in place. And I also just wanted to tell you, I forgot, I leave the threads long when I'm beading. If you cut them too short, the weight of the bead over a decade or so will pull the bead off. So just make sure you keep your threads long. Okay, now it is time to machine sew the seams and the side seams and the shoulders. Then I will be back. That was forever ago, but I've filmed I sort of make half the video, then I do the rest of the jacket and film it and then make the other half. So yes, I machine sewed these and then I've just pinned the seam allowance back. You just splay it open, pin them back, and then you have to hand stitch it down like I did the other ones. So I'm just going to do the two sides and the back, and then once I'm done, then I'm also going to hand stitch the hem. So this is next after I've done the hand stitching of the seams on the sides and the shoulders. So now I just have to mark the hemline. So you go along and measure where the hem has to be turned up. Then you turn it up and pin it into place. Then you hand stitch it. And once the hem is done, the next thing to do is the neckline. If you're not beading your jacket, then it's easier to do the outer jacket and this lining at the same time. But if you are beading the jacket, it's easier to do the outer jacket as one, which means you have to finish the neckline by itself rather than just normally when you're doing the neckline you stitch the silk lining to the tweed outer jacket and you machine sew them, and that's how they sew them together. But this way you have to measure where the actual neckline is, then you clip the curves, then you so that it will lay flat, and then you pin them all back, and then you hand stitch them once, hand stitch them again. It does take longer, but because I'm going to bead it, like the silk lining just gets in the way when you're beading, so I'm doing it this way, and I will add the silk lining by hand later. So now that the whole of the torso is done and all the sleeves done, the next thing is to set the sleeves. So the easiest way for me is to just put a pin in where each of the notches are, because pins are easier to see the notches. So then you match up the notches, and I find it easier to do top center, then bottom 2/3, like the underarm bit, and then it's the top third that's difficult, so really take your time with that. A lot of people find that they find it really difficult to machine sew sleeves in, just hand stitch it in. It's considered better anyway. I was just short of time, so it's slightly a fraction quicker to do it by machine. So if you don't do it by machine, you do it by hand, or do it by hand first, then do it by machine. That's also absolutely perfect. The point is that you just want a nice looking sleeve. So once you've done that, the next thing to do is pin the seam allowance up into the sleeve. You have to clip the curves, so the little bit under the arm. You just trim it down a tiny bit, and then you clip the curves so that it will sit nicely when you push the seam allowance into the sleeve, and then you hand stitch it. I hand stitch it from the outside and then once again from the inside. This is obviously a different jacket, but you can see how stitching the seam allowance up into the shoulder there helps get that really beautiful round shape to the shoulder. So it does take a little bit of time, and it's annoying because it's right at the end, but it's completely worth it. And here we go. And so it does take longer this way. It is a bit fiddly making the structural shell and then draping the tweed over the top. But I mean, look at that pattern matching. You just can't get pattern matching better than that. Even if you buy, it's recommended that you buy 2.5 times as much fabric as you need. Actually, don't do as I do as I say, because I only bought a yard. And I think you're supposed to buy 2 yards or 2.5 yards, something like that, to make this jacket, but I've cropped it. So anyway, here it is, and the pattern matching looks good from the side too. And I love the weight of the beads I've got on the cuffs. I'm actually going to do more beading around the neckline and around the bottom of the hem as well, but I didn't have time, so I thought I'd just show you the jacket while I have the light. And then I'll give you an update on the Kandinsky jacket, and I'll go do some more beading. Hopefully I'll get it finished before I have to wrap this episode and upload it. But I love this beading. I love it so much. It's very cool. So I've got loads of red beads, and I think I know how I'm going to use them up. Anyway, as I said, I've got more beading to do around the neckline and at the hem of the jacket. So here is an update on my final beading for the Kandinsky. I think it's finished. I think so. I mean, I really, really love the pale pink beads, so maybe I'll do more of those. So this is what it looked like last time you saw it there. I still needed to do some blue on the left shoulder. The right shoulder is pretty much done. And also at the bottom here, there's in between the coral and under the green, there's a whole section that needs to be done. So this is the bottom, the hem of the jacket. And this is a close-up. So I did pale pink and a couple of different tone greens. And I also did the blue on the shoulder. So this is the shoulder that you saw previously. It's all done. And then this one here, I added the blue. And I also added some, that orange, the shorter ones. I added that, and the pink magenta-y colour beside it. And the magenta all through the metallic teal one. I also added that. And there's also some green under the teal on the shoulder, but I'm not sure if you can tell. And I just like how dimensional it is, like how everything's all different heights. And then I also finished all the bottom. And so, yeah, I think there's still a little bit more to do around the neckline perhaps. And then I did this pale pink. I particularly love this pale pink. I think it looks really beautiful. And again, I love all the different heights, and it makes it so three-dimensional. And the couple of different greens. You can't really see the lighter green from far away. And the short ones in the orange patch, I did the short ones. The long ones were there, but I just thought it looked more interesting with the shorter ones. And also I sort of needed a little bit more weight on that side. And with this cuff, because the green beads, that weight is so much higher up on the arm than the other side, I just added some weight to the actual wrist section by adding 2 more colours in there. And yeah, so the weights are more comparable other than, because I just felt the other bit was a little bit too high up on the arm to count as a wrist, the weight of the wrist. So yeah, but I'm just so happy with this. It's completely different than anything else I've ever done. And I just sort of turned it around again and decided, because these are the beads that I have left. I've got, you can't really tell from them just lying on the bead tray, but they're hot pink and magenta ones. And I've used that entire bag up. So these are the only ones that remain. So I decided to just see this red patch sort of at the natural waist, so a little bit higher up than at the bottom. I think I will use them on that and just add a tiny bit weight this side to make the whole thing more even and use up the beads. I did add the remainder of those beads, but I forgot to film it. So I just went and hurried and filmed it. So as you can see, they're just little short stacks. And this white section here is the bit that I'm thinking about adding some more pale pink, maybe. I don't know. I was supposed to be using the pale pink on something else. Anywho, so this is what I've been doing just recently. I marked out the bottom line of where I'm going to do the beading, and then I marked out the top line, and then I'm going to bead in between these two lines. So yeah, it does take a while, but I think it looks good. So I've started doing, this is the bottom, and these are the beads. They're clear glass beads, and then they've got this petrol finish, so a sort of metallic oil slick finish on them. I think they're just beautiful. And from far away, they look the exact same color as like all the colors of the tweed sort of mixed together. But when you see them up close, they look amazing. And at night, they sort of look like silver because they reflect, so the metallic coating reflects so much. They're amazing. So yes, I'm getting there eventually. I don't think I will finish it in time, but I will give it a try. I moved the light slightly so you can see the shadows they were casting made it look like there were twice as many beads, but this is the actual amount. Well, it will surprise absolutely no one that I didn't get to do all the beading, because it was like, I think it was about 1,000 beads. I've done over half. I've done about 500 and something, not quite 600. There's some left, and I was cutting them by 100 lots. So yes, I've still got all of the band around the hem to fill, and the band around the neckline to fill as well. But I think it's going to look very lovely once it's done, and you kind of get the general idea. I've done the outlines, and I should have done the other side. I decided to do the triangle before I decided that I was going to do the other beading, but and in future I will, if I do three different, like if I do collar and cuff beading is what I call it, plus the design on the back. In future, I'll make the design on the back a little bit lower. But I do like where the triangle is, because it's sort of between the shoulder blades, so it will hang, really, the weight will hang well. But yes, that is the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you've been inspired to make a Chanel style jacket of your own. Vogue 7975 is my personal favorite jackets pattern, or if you want a pattern that's a little bit simpler, then the Berta 6123 is a good one as well. Actually, I haven't used that Berta pattern in a while. I might make another one from that, because it's really good to use if you want to embellish something, because you sort of cut out all the pieces and then you do all the embellishment, and then you just have to hand sew a few seams together once all the embellishment's done, and you can do it flat, which is so much easier than having to sort of try and work on a finished jacket. Okay, really going now. Thanks again for watching, and happy sewing. I've got so much beading to do. Done just over half of this one. And yeah, I think I might do some pale pink on the Kandinsky just at the top. That white patch at the top is so very, very white. And these pale pink beads are adorable.